We're keeping it small this year, Mom. Just us. I think that's better for everyone. That is what my son said to me on the phone, while I was standing at my kitchen counter with a pen in my hand and a list of everyone I still needed to buy gifts for. But first you need to understand what led us there. If you have ever been quietly told you are too much by the person you gave your whole life to, stay with me. Because what I did next took 6 weeks and it cost me nothing, but it changed everything. My name is Carol. I am 66 years old. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse at Mercy General Hospital in a small city in central Tennessee. And I retired 3 years ago when my knees finally said enough is enough. My husband, Warren, died of a heart attack on a Tuesday morning in March 4 years ago. He was in the backyard when it happened. He had been building me a raised garden bed out of cedar planks, the kind he'd seen me admire in a magazine the previous summer. The garden bed is still there. I planted tomatoes in it every year since. Feels like the right thing to do. Warren and I had lived in our house on Sycamore Creek Road for 27 years. White siding, black shutters, a front porch with 2 rocking chairs that Warren repainted every spring without being asked. After he died, I kept both chairs out there. I still sit in mine every evening. The other one just sits. My grandson, Cooper, is 5 years old. He has Warren's laugh, sudden and wide, like something delighted him before he had time to prepare for it. My son David was not always the man who told me not to come for Christmas. He was the boy who, at 14 years old, saved every dollar from his summer job mowing lawns to buy me a pair of winter boots I had mentioned once, offhand, that I needed. He drove with his father to 3 stores to find the right ones. He wrapped them himself in newspaper because he couldn't find the tape. When I opened them, he looked at the floor the way teenage boys do when they are proud of something and don't know what to do with it. I noticed the change after he married Kristen. It wasn't immediate. It was gradual, the way a room gets darker when clouds move in. You don't notice until you reach for the light. Kristen is not a bad person. I want to be careful about that. She loves David. She loves Cooper. But she had a way of measuring things I didn't know I was being measured by. The first call came on a Sunday morning in January 2.5 years ago. David's voice had a particular quality to it that I had learned to recognize over the years. Softer than usual. Slower. Like he was testing each word before he said it out loud. "Mom, we're in a little bit of a bind," he said. "The furnace went out. We've got quotes and the cheapest one is $3,400. We just don't have it right now with the holidays and everything." I set down my coffee cup. "Course," I said. "I'll transfer it today." He exhaled in a way that told me he had been holding that breath since before he dialed. I transferred the money before noon. I didn't write it down. It didn't occur to me to write it down. He was my son. That's not how you think about it when it's your son. The furnace was followed 11 months later by Cooper's preschool deposit, $1,200, because the good school had a deadline and they'd missed it with their own account short. Then came the car repair, $870, when Kristen's transmission went. Then the medical bill from Cooper's ear infection that their insurance hadn't fully covered, $640. Each time, David called with that same careful voice. Each time I said yes before he finished asking. 18 months in, I tried once to mention it gently. I said something about keeping track of what I'd helped with, just so we were both clear. David went quiet for a moment. "Mom," he said, "I didn't know you were keeping a ledger on your own family." I apologized. I actually apologized. I sat at my desk that October, 3 days after that phone call, and I opened the small notebook where I kept my household accounts. I added up what I had given them since the furnace. The number was $11,340. In 18 months. I looked at that number in my own handwriting for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed on Sycamore Creek Road and kept going. I had been too patient. Too willing to add it up and then close the notebook and say nothing. But what I didn't know yet was that David and Kristen had been telling people, family, friends, their neighbors, a version of my life that had very little to do with the life I was actually living. I found out from my neighbor Patsy. Patsy Gilmore had lived 2 doors down from me for 19 years. She brought food when Warren died and stayed to wash the dishes without being asked, which is how you know who someone really is. She was not a woman who repeated things lightly. She came by on a Thursday afternoon in November, carrying a loaf of banana bread and a look on her face that told me the bread was not entirely the reason for the visit. "Carol," she said after we'd been sitting a few minutes, "I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but I think you ought to know something." She told me carefully. She had run into Kristen at the pharmacy the week before. Kristen had mentioned in the course of conversation that Carol was struggling since Warren passed, that Carol needed a lot of support, that David worried about her being alone and had been doing everything he could to help her stay on her feet. Patsy looked at me steadily when she finished. "I just didn't think that sounded like the Carol I know," she said. Thanked her. I walked her to the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment after she left, looking at the staircase Warren had refinished the summer before his last summer. Then I went to my desk drawer and found the card that Helen Marsh had given me at a neighborhood association meeting 2 years before. Family law and estate planning. She had said, "Simply call me if you ever need clarity." I had kept the card without knowing exactly why. Now I knew. I called her that afternoon. Helen Marsh was 62 years old and had the kind of quiet precision that comes from spending decades making sure things are documented correctly. She listened to everything without interrupting. Then she asked me what I wanted. Not what I was afraid of. Not what David had done. What I wanted. I told her. We met twice over the following 3 weeks. I also spoke with my accountant, Bernard Holloway, who had been doing my taxes since 1989, and who found my handwritten notebook entirely sufficient as a record of what had been transferred and when. I made 2 changes. I will not tell you what both of them were. I will tell you that one of them involved my will, and one of them involved a standing arrangement at my bank that I had set up 18 months earlier without fully thinking through what it meant. Helen told me when I left her office the second time that I looked lighter. I told her I felt like I'd put down something I hadn't realized I was carrying. David found out on a Wednesday. I was sitting on the front porch in Warren's chair. I do that sometimes just to see what he saw from there, when my phone rang. It rang 4 times before I picked it up. 3 days before David called that Wednesday, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Cooper's preschool teacher, a young woman named Miss Andy with a calm voice and careful words. "Mrs. Carroll," she said, "Cooper has had a hard morning. He's been asking for you." He said, and I'm quoting him exactly, he said, "My grandma knows how to fix sad." I was already reaching for my keys. David and Kristen were both at work. The school had tried them first. I was the emergency contact, the same as I had always been, the same as I planned to stay. Cooper was sitting outside the main office in a small plastic chair with his backpack on his lap and his shoes untied. When he saw me come through the door, he did what 5-year-olds do when they finally feel safe after a long time of not feeling safe. He stood up and walked straight into me. We sat in my car for a little while before I started the engine. He asked if we could go to my house. Said yes. I made him a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup from the can, which is what he always asked for. He sat at my kitchen table with his shoes off, kicking his feet the way he had since he was big enough to sit in the chair. After a while, he looked up from his soup. "Grandma," he said, "how come you didn't come for Thanksgiving?" Thought carefully. "Your mom and dad wanted a quiet holiday this year," I said. "Grown-ups need that sometimes." He looked at me with Warren's eyes. "I didn't want quiet," he said. "I wanted you." He reached across the table and put his small hand on top of mine. Just left it there, warm and certain, the way children are certain about the things that matter to them. I looked at the kitchen window. The light was coming in just right. David called at 4:17 that Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting in Warren's rocking chair on the front porch when the phone rang. I let it ring 4 times. Then I picked up. His voice was different. The careful softness was gone. What was underneath it was something younger and less sure of itself. "Mom," he said, "I got a letter from Helen Marsh's office." "I know," I said. I don't. Why didn't you talk to me first?" "I tried," I said. You told me I was keeping a ledger. The silence that followed was the kind that means someone is sitting with something they said and hearing it differently now. Mom, I didn't mean. I know what you meant, I said. And I know what you told people about me. That I was struggling. That you were helping me stay on my feet. David, I transferred $11,340 to your account in 18 months. I was not the one who needed help staying on my feet. He was quiet. Why didn't you say something? He asked. Because, I said. Every time I got close to it, I was made to feel like the problem. He didn't have an answer for that. I love you, I said. I'll talk to you when I'm ready. I hung up before he could respond. I sat on the porch and listened to the street for a while. A dog barked 2 houses down. A car turned the corner and slowed and kept going. David sold the second car. The newer one, Kristen's. 4 months after that phone call. They moved from the house they'd been renting in the newer part of town to a smaller place closer to his job. I don't know the details and I haven't asked. He came by on a Saturday in February alone. He stood at the front door the way people stand when they aren't sure if they're welcome, and I opened it and stepped back and let him in without a word. We sat at the kitchen table. He had taken the train. He looked like a man who had been thinking hard for several months and had arrived somewhere quieter on the other side of it. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. Not for all of it being hard. But for making you feel like the problem when you weren't. I looked at my son for a long moment. You can come for Easter, I said. Just you and Cooper if that's what works. We'll figure out the rest as we go. He nodded. His eyes went bright in the way he had learned from Warren. Is the garden bed out back? He asked. It's always out there, I said. I am sitting on the front porch as I finish telling you this. It is early March. The air has that particular Tennessee smell. Cool and a little green, like something is deciding to come back. Warren's rocking chair is beside mine. I don't move it. I've stopped pretending I might. My phone buzzed a few minutes ago. A text from my niece Lori in Knoxville, who calls every Sunday and never asks for anything except how I am. Thinking about you today, Aunt Carol. You doing okay? Type back, more than okay. Come see me soon. She sent a heart. I put the phone in my pocket and looked out at Sycamore Creek Road. I spent a long time being the person who said yes so reliably that no one thought to ask if I was all right. I'm not that person anymore. And the quiet that replaced her is not loneliness. It is just mine. Have you ever had to stop showing up before someone realized how much you mattered? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and more often than you know, your words become the next story. Share this with someone who has been saying yes for too long and doesn't know they're allowed to stop. And if you aren't subscribed yet, do it now. The next story begins with a grandmother who finds something hidden in her late husband's Bible 30 years after he died. What she does with it will stay with you.